All right, so I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Bloomington Environmental Commission on January 21st, 2021. I'll call the roll. Bailey Anderson. Matt Caldy.
Here.
Susanna Evans Comfort.
Here.
Meredith Dickerson.
Here.
Don Eggert.
Here.
I myself am here. Shelly Hoshaw. Mike Litwin.
Present.
David Parkhurst.
Yep.
All right, a quorum is met. Moving on, next on the agenda to introductions. I don't think we need to do introductions this time around because there's nobody new. Unless you disagree, Linda, and think we should proceed.
I'd go ahead and do introductions just for the public out there.
Okay. In that case, I'll start. My name is Andrew Gunther. I'm chair of the Environmental Commission. We'll move on next. Don, how about you go next?
Environmental Commission.
My name is Matt Caldy, Commissioner.
Mike? Let's have Ben introduce himself as well.
Ben Sheriff, fellow.
Dave?
Unmute, Dave.
Oh, yeah. Dave Parker's commissioner.
Linda?
Linda Thompson, environmental planner.
Perfect. Susanna?
Susanna Evans Comfort, Commissioner.
Meredith and Shelby, we're doing introductions. So Meredith, if you want to go first.
Meredith Dickerson, Commissioner.
Shelby, Commissioner.
Perfect. Those are all our commissioners and all those who work with the commission on a regular basis. We'll move along to approval of minutes. Were there minutes to approve for last month sent out?
There were minutes, but they weren't sent out till today. So I don't know if people are ready to vote on them.
I got them. I move we accept them.
Second.
Okay. There's a motion and a second, so I'll move down the list. Matt Caldy?
Yes.
Susanna?
Yes.
Meredith? If you didn't see them, you can feel free to abstain.
Sorry, if you called my name, I have a weak internet connection.
Yeah, she appears frozen. So we'll move on to Don.
Yes.
Because I didn't see the minutes, honestly, when they were sent out. Shelby?
I'll abstain as well. I haven't seen them.
Mike?
I had some very minor comments about housekeeping issues, so I will vote to approve.
Okay. And Dave?
Approve.
All right. So 5-3, motion passes. Minutes are approved. If we have minor housekeeping issues, you can send those to Ben. He can get those incorporated before the final draft.
Yeah, I can get that tomorrow.
Perfect. Moving on to the next on the agenda is public comment. There's a limit of 5 minutes per person for public comment. If any member of the public wishes to give public comment this evening, they can raise their hand or type in the chat function, and our host will let you speak. And we'll give that as normal a couple minutes or so before we move on. if there's no comment. Not seeing anyone, Ben. I only see one member of the public, and I don't think that they wish to speak this evening. So we'll move on then, if there's no objection, to our next agenda item, which are reports from our various commissions. First on the list is Tree Commission. Do we have a report from Tree Commission besides the one that was sent out via email earlier today or yesterday?
Well, not really. We had a very short meeting. Our leader was off for family business, and so we had the Urban Foresters report, which I have sent to you. The Mia, her last name I think is Williams, is the IU representative, and she talked about how this came up in the last meeting as well. She's talked about how IU is trying to get away from taking people sponsoring particular trees and then having plaques put down under them, and instead going to sponsoring whole areas instead, and groves, I think they will call them. And so the university is still working on that. And that was about all we did, actually. We talked about some warehouse. It may be the thing that's called the warehouse down by Switchyard Park that the city isn't happy with because they haven't planted enough trees or something. But this really wasn't on the agenda, and it was unclear what people were actually trying to say. So I'll quit there.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions for Dave about the Tree Commission report? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Monroe County Environmental Commission. I couldn't actually go to this meeting this month. I had a conflicting meeting, but from the agenda, there wasn't much going on. They basically did their organizational meeting for the year. So they elected officers and discussed long-term goals for the commission. But once I find out from the minutes what those goals were, I'll let you know. But they didn't do anything formal at that meeting, if that makes any sense. It was basically like our bucket list meeting that we'll have next month. Any questions about what I know about the Monroe County Environmental Commission report? Move on to Bloomington Commission on Sustainability. Don, do you have a report for them?
This much of their meeting was administrative as usual, but the most significant thing I think was I would say was that they voted on whether they should be submitting a letter to the city council in support of the climate action plan, which passed. And that I guess I don't think it's an intent, I believe, if I understood them correctly. And I kind of wondered whether we will be doing something similar. So I asked to get a copy of what they would be submitting so they have an idea, but I haven't heard anything back yet. I asked either to send it to me or to Linda, or I think Andrew. So, but I haven't heard anything back. Did any of you receive anything?
I haven't yet. No, Linda.
Sorry, I don't recall getting anything.
Okay. Then other than that, they were basically going over election planning. So.
Okay. Uh,
But
oh, thank you, Don. Any questions
Okay.
for Don on the BCOS report for this month? And if you get that, Don, feel free to send that to Linda and myself. I'd like to look at it, as I'm sure Linda would as well.
But is that something worth thinking of?
I'd say that's very possible after the amendment process. Once we go through if we have any changes we want to see to the plan as a whole, I'd say we could very likely do something similar to the memos we do for Plan Commission, I would say, where we could send a memo saying, we're supportive of this document if these changes are made. I think that's something that's reasonably considerable. But if there are other options we can do, which is why I want to see their letter, that would be just as effective. I'd like to see those as well and consider them.
Mhm.
Any questions for Don on the BCOS report? Seeing none, we'll move on to ERAC. Do we have a report from ERAC this month?
No meetings recently, and I'll get you the minutes of the last meeting once I get them. I can't remember
Thank
when
you.
our next meeting is. It's in my calendar, so I think I won't miss it, but
Thank you, Dave. Any questions for Dave on the ERAC report? Seeing none, we'll move on to the MPO Citizens Advisory Committee. The Citizens Advisory Committee doesn't meet until next month. I believe the schedule shifted, so they no longer meet right before our meetings. And they didn't have one at the end of December due to the holiday. So once I haven't received an agenda for this month either yet. So once I receive that, I can send that out to you guys, or I can just give a report on it at our next meeting about what happened at this one. But yeah, there's no report for MPO CAC this month yet. Any questions? Moving on to Friends of Lake Monroe.
oh, one more comment about ERAC, actually. My 2 years has expired and I've applied to be renewed, and they are going to recommend, I think, that I be renewed. So we'll see what happens with that. Friends of Lake Monroe, the steering committee for their 2-year research project, we would have met this past Monday, except it was Martin Luther King Day, so they put off the meeting until this coming Monday. So it'll be next month when I can report to you about that.
All right. Any questions for Dave about that? Seeing none, we'll move on to next on our agenda, which is discussion of our working groups. The one on the agenda, of course, this month, as usual, is the ECPC and Planning Commission. Linda, do you have anything to report this month for us?
I do briefly. We've talked about this site before, and there's no major changes, so I'll just go over it again briefly. It's called The Standard, and it's located where the current Brownstone Terrace apartments are. And the plan is to take down the entire Brownstone Terrace apartments, and rebuild the Standard. And when we talked about before, they were requesting a zoning change, which they got, and it's now zoned for student housing. So what we've got before us now is basically the same plan, but this is the site plan. They have committed to affordable housing and the National Green Building Certification. And in our original memo, we asked them if they could try to go for the Emerald certification instead of the Silver. But so far, nothing's changed, so they must not be inclined to do that, but it's something that we can ask for again anyway. They do have they were asked about commercial space, and according to the petitioner statement, they will put commercial space in if they can get rid of some of their buffer yard through a variance. So that's something that the ECPC will discuss, whether you want more required green space to go away or not. And they're working out a deal with the Bloomington Transit. The site is 7¼ acres, so it's very big, between Walnut and Dunn, right across the street from Terra Trace. And let's see here, they will have, let me look here real quick, the number of beds. They will have 440 units and 1,061 beds. And it'll be 3 buildings that are connected via an above ground catwalk. Let's see here. They are planning a parking garage in which they plan to have some electric vehicle charging stations, but I don't know how many yet, and solar panels to light that garage. Let's see here. Of the comments I've already sent to the petitioner, I originally asked for showing the buffer yards, and they show the buffer yards, but it's not. It doesn't match staff's idea of which buffer yard they should have. So we'll keep looking into that. Their landscape plan that they submitted recently needs revisions. And as I mentioned, the request to change the silver classification to emerald. And excuse me, I also had a question in there on how will they prove to us, to the city and to the EC, that they actually got their silver certification, and more importantly, what if they don't? It's part of the commitment, but I'd like to see a comment from them on what happens if they don't get certified. That's kind of all I've got right now on it. I'll send details to the planning committee. But basically what I've said tonight is the same thing I said previously. I just wanted to remind everybody and also repeat that previously it was a zoning request and now it is the site plan request. So that's really it right now.
Linda, I have one quick question.
Sure.
Thanks for the information on that. Do you know any of the details of what they're offering in terms of working with Bloomington Public Transit?
Not everything. But they have committed to not having their own private shuttle. That has turned out to be problematic for transit. So they're still working on transit beefing up the shuttle service, and I don't know the details of that conversation, but they're working with transit on that. That's kind of all I know, that they've committed not to have their own personal transit.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Linda on the standard? Yes, Matt.
Sorry, has there been any indication of whether they'll be able to preserve the tree canopy there on the south side of those lots just north of the train tracks, or has that not been discussed?
Well, they did put something in the petitioner's statement about that, and there's a fence along there right now that they intend to keep if they can, and they intend to keep all that vegetation where it is. They have no real good reason to take it away from that steep slope, that kind of artificial steep slope. So they have said that they were going to keep it. And there's a required buffer yard there. So they, it would be in their best interest to keep it.
What's the difference? Question I have is, so they're going to have potentially 1,000 residents? Is that
Yes.
correct? And the present occupancy is about what? Anybody
Oh, I have that here somewhere. I don't know if I can find it real quick though.
So it's just thinking of if there's a big change, how that's going to affect the Bloomington Transit, et cetera.
Right. Currently, there's 121 units there with 232 beds. And the proposal is for 440 units with 1,061 beds. So yeah, that's a big increase, which is why they're working with Bloomington Transit on some additional routes. Additionally, they are putting up new sidewalks, and one of the sidewalks is going to be 10 feet wide because so many students walk between Brownstone currently and campus. So yeah, it's a large increase, but they're yeah, they're and then they're going to have all the bike parking that they're required. They're also going to have scooter parking.
Be good if that big sidewalk could be made permeable somehow.
Yeah, well, we can talk about it. Usually that's frowned upon because many people want sidewalks to be concrete, so they're gray, and side paths to be asphalt, so they're black. So it's absolutely something I can check into.
Any idea how it's going to affect overall the impermeable? I mean, it looks pretty much largely impermeable. I'm looking at a Google map on my computer screen, and how's it going to, any feel for whether there'll be a change in runoff?
I don't know that. I have a question in on how much, what the percentage of impervious surface coverage is intended to be. And I haven't gotten an answer to that yet. However, in the petitioner statement, they said that they wanted to follow all the UDO rules unless they go with that commercial space that they would put into the vegetated buffer. And that would require a variance.
And I can just pop in for a second. I live near the Brownstone, so I've been over there a number of times on my dog walks. And the current apartment complex there has a lot of parking space. There's very little green space on that location as is. So I think part of this plan is not only are they going up, they're building upwards, they're adding floors. I think they're going to, by building the parking garage, eliminate some of the surface parking and move that into living space. So I don't know. It's already a pretty desecrated site, to be frank. So there's not a lot to lose.
Right, and they plan to have a large parking garage for the residents, and then just a small amount of visitor parking spaces.
Any other questions for Linda?
Well, it seems like it's too bad you can't specify what the commercial properties would be, because if it was like a grocery store or a coffee shop or something that would serve the local people staying there so they wouldn't have to travel, that'd be great. But if it's a commercial space goes to an insurance agent or a realty or something, then I'd be less happy about it taking away buffer space. So
there's They probably don't know that answer yet. I mean, I'll ask, because for all I know, it's their office. That they didn't say that what it was, but I will ask and see if they even know yet.
Yeah, as a neighbor of this site, I attended one of the developers meetings about a year ago. And they did say that they were going to have management on site 24/7. So at least part of that commercial space may very well be that office you're describing. I also think since this is going to be a student-oriented facility, we're unlikely to see insurance agents. I think it's going to be some kind of ice cream or treats of alcoholic or non-alcoholic variety and convenience foods that will be in there, would be my guess.
For a project like this, for a project like this, and knowing my wife and I used to live in Terra Trace, across the street from there. Dumb question is, what did they do with the building debris from us if they're going to do such a large tear down?
Well, I don't know the answer to that yet, but one of the standard things that the EC puts in their Plan Commission memos is a request to reuse or recycle all the construction demolition debris that they can. In a situation like this, my guess is they won't have very much that they can reuse or recycle. You know, it's not as if it's a nice limestone building and they're going to save the limestone cladding or something like that, or beams or anything. So it'll be in the memo, but my guess is that there won't be very much that they can save.
Where does building debris go now in Monroe County?
It goes to the landfill where all our trash goes. When Monroe County had its own landfill, there was a municipal solid waste landfill, and then there was a separate construction and demolition debris landfill. And the reason for that is because the regulations for liners are different. But right now, all the construction, if it's clean fill, they might put it, somewhere for fill. But if it's just construction demolition debris, it'll go where all our trash goes.
It's going to use a lot of landfill space.
Any further questions for Linda on the standard projects?
All righty. Well, you can always email if you come up with something.
And a brief update on a previous petition the EC had worked on, the McDole Business Center petition by Switchyard Park. I actually spoke at the Plan Commission meeting on behalf of the EC, on behalf of the memo that we submitted for that project, against approval because of the lack of green space that the project did incorporate. They originally asked for, in some areas, 100% impervious surface, when the limit is 60%. And the city talked them down to 80% impervious surface. We still thought that was too high. So I spoke against it. It passed the Plan Commission eventually because I believe there were some misconceptions about the project that the EC still has concerns about. So I plan on speaking to the City Council, again, on behalf of the EC, as we do occasionally, on the McDole petition, because I think that it goes so directly against the UDO that we just worked on approving over the past couple years regarding green space and climate change mitigation, that I think it's a worthwhile topic to pursue. But you can, I'll let you all know when that comes up on the City Council agenda. The City Council, as you may know, this past year recently instituted, or the year before recently instituted, a standing committee structure. So now before it goes before the entire city council, it has to pass through one of their committees. So it will be a multi-step process through the city council that once I know where it's going and when, I'll let you all know. Any questions on that? All right, thanks, Linda.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your work as always. Moving on to the next item in our agenda, old business. We're discussing the draft climate action plan. Like we discussed in our last meeting, we split up the draft climate action plan amongst the members to determine whether or not there were any amendments or changes to the draft that we wanted to present before the plan was finalized at the city council. So we'll go over just, I think the best way is to go over section by section and just go through any possible amendment items or changes that the members who have read it have for us. I'm hoping that someone can take notes and compile all these into one document while we go through the process. I can do that, or if Linda or Ben feel up to it, whatever they think is best.
Yeah, I can do that. That's not an issue.
Okay. Yeah, so I would just split it up by section and we'll just go through it. And then at the end of each section, we'll review and then we can decide from there about what we want to do, whether we want to explore some of them more deeply, focus on some or not others, or whether we want to approve all of them for submission to economic and sustainable development. Does that sound good, Linda? All right, so we'll move on to the first section, which is technically the executive summary. There may not be many actual technical amendments to the executive summary. Another thing I want to say before we actually get fully started is if you have any formatting amendments, so if you think, you know, a color is not used correctly, or if you think the text is too small, or if there's a small typo somewhere, I would reserve those amendments and submit them yourself as an individual to economic and sustainable development. So we can reserve EC time and efforts on amendments that are technical and environmentally policy-based, if that makes any sense, because I don't want the EC to submit a list of amendments and then have half the amendments be technical and half of them be formatting. I'd rather just focus on the technical and have people work out the formatting on their own time, if that makes sense. So through the executive summary, there might not be, like I said, many technical amendments, but if there are, I want to give people the opportunity to offer them. So does anyone have any executive summary amendments to offer for the draft climate action plan?
I have a couple.
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Just a couple. On page 10, they talked about surface water quality and about the negative effects of it. And I suggested that they should add increased stormwater runoff will increase stream flow, possibly destabilizing streams and resulting in increased bank erosion.
Good.
And then one other in the section on, again, on page 10, the greenhouse gas reduction. There was a lot of numbers mentioned in there, and I had trouble getting some of the math to add up. That's all.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, and the green space section where they're talking about trees, the math doesn't add up either.
Okay. Good catches on those. Do we have anyone else with amendments to the executive summary? Most of my amendments for the executive summary, like I said, were formatting in nature. They didn't go into enough depth, I didn't find, in the summary, as they shouldn't, to offer any substantial technical amendments. So I don't have anything personally for this section, so I'm not surprised if others don't as well, but one more time, I'll ask if anyone has any technical amendments for the executive summary section of this report. Okay. Seeing none, we'll take down those two from Mike. Thank you, Mike, for your work on that. We'll move on to the transportation section, which we had 3 or 4 people working on, I believe. Do we have any amendments on the transportation section of this report to offer?
This is the one I had a question about.
Yeah.
And this is a question for you all. It didn't seem to make any sense to me that the section was called transportation and land use. It seemed to me like land use should be something separate from transportation.
I thought that land use would have been better under built environment than it would under
Yeah, it's kind of,
transportation. I agree with Linda on that.
yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay. So let me just, I'm sorry, I'm clicking through about 20 things right now trying to find where I was. While I try to find my place, does anyone have another amendment to offer for this?
Oh, yeah. I'm not sure if we want to include an action item that says that we should use more biofuels. That's pretty controversial in the environmental world to
Biofuels?
raise corn for biofuels.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's to me, it's more of a biofuels is an issue for growing more corn and soybeans and not necessarily feeding anybody. And and also the amount of energy that goes into producing agricultural crops and then turning it into quote biofuels. When I taught my energy class, looking at the published literature, it was basically making make it the blanket longer by cutting off one end and sewing it on the other end of the blanket. It's a great pork barrel is basically my impression of it, and that was the impression of what I saw in the literature, including the textbook that Ivy Tech used.
Right. That's why I didn't think it was a good idea to use that as an action item.
Yeah, let's get it taken out.
Was there a lot about biofuels in there, Linda, or was it just a footnote, more or less? Like, do they make a big emphasis on it?
No, it's mentioned in 2 of the action items.
Which is too many.
Agree.
Okay, so we'll put that on the list for discussion. I remember reading through this section, and rather than having a lot of amendments per se, I had a lot of questions on the hows. So, you know, there's a lot of things in here that I would anticipate reading in a state report more so than a local government report, which makes me, like on things like biofuels, for example, that make me question what the implementation would look like in real life, rather than just on paper. Because it's easy to say on paper, you know, we're going to decrease by 8% how far people drive, but it's a much different reality I found actually making that happen in real life. But I didn't have many technical amendments to offer on things that I would change. More so, I just had questions about whether or not these action items that they do have are 100% practical to enact on our level.
I can also envision that a lot of senior citizens in the community, when reading through this document, again, the emphasis on bicycle and public transit after the ongoing brouhaha over the Uniform Development Ordinance and plexes, I think you can really open another large can of worms. Skeptical. And also one of the things that really strikes me is that it seems that the authors kind of are not paying much attention to the growth, particularly in the rest of the world, of e-vehicles. And it's like, oh, we're going to just go to bicycle, walking, and public transportation, and that private ownership of vehicles will just magically disappear. Just sort of the impression. I mean, it's not like looking at line by line, but just in the flavor of it.
Yeah, I'm going back through this section now. I read it so long ago that things are coming to me as I'm reading through it. I also don't understand why land use is filed under this section, because reading through it, I don't see many actual land use action items. They're all transportation related.
Yeah, there were a couple things. There was one where I thought would be E1, I guess, the action where they eliminate minimum parking requirements and force, developers to determine and defend their own transportation needs. I'm not opposed to eliminating minimums, but I don't imagine many developers have been asking for less parking than is currently allowed. I have no issue with the action. I just don't understand from an implementation or enforcement standpoint if it'll make any difference.
You'd think parking maximums would work better, right? I mean,
yeah.
Just makes sense.
Right. I read it and it gave me pause. I thought, well, this seems good, but like, will it have any impact at all? And this is one of their immediate, their first year type of actions. And I get it. It's relatively easy. You can do it on paper, but is it going to accomplish any of their goals, whether it's good or not? I mean,
yeah. How many petitioners come before the EC and go, I really want to have as few parking spaces as is humanly possible?
Yeah, I want 0, and it's annoying that you guys force us to provide parking.
It's a very rare conversation. I wish we had more conversations like that. No, I agree with Matt. That's a great point. Parking minimums is a start. But if we want to see actual tangible impact, I would say parking maximums is the correct target to be aiming for.
I did have one other meaningful comment on this section, and it was in the next one, in the H section, where they were talking about off-road and lawn equipment, including leaf blowers. They talked about how they would want to set something up where when something fails, it gets replaced with an electric model, and they wanted to try to pressure the university, other people that aren't the city, to do the same. And I think that's great, but I want them to be more aggressive, particularly towards leaf blowers, because they're just the worst of the worst. So I would lobby for something stronger, like immediately replacing the small engine leaf blowers with an electric model, even though I know that would be more expensive. If we want to make a real impact, it seems like this section, this H section, was far and away the most emissions, out of any of them. And I would have liked to see them be more aggressive on that bullet point.
Aren't we also
Now, what page are you on? I'm not seeing that under H.
Let me pull it up real quick.
Is that in the text or is that in the list in the back?
It is in the text on page, it's right at the bottom of a page. Do they have numbers? 2-8, I guess.
2-8.
Introduce a policy to replace city off-road and lawn equipment with electric and low carbon fuel alternative options at the time of replacement.
Okay, thank you. I see it now.
Okay.
Question I have is that wouldn't we also be trying to more encourage composting than are they, how are they thinking in terms of how, if you're blowing, or what are they going to do with the leaves?
There are a lot of really great notes on composting that I like in the waste section, but in the transportation section, they don't touch on that in the slightest. And I think that's okay, just by designation that they do that later.
I mean,
One thing I had a question about, it's more of a question than an amendment. It may just be showing my ignorance. Under the what you can do section on the last page of this section, they have a bullet point list of things you can do personally to offset your carbon emissions. And one of them says, buy carbon credits to offset your impact. Can't avoid the trip, buy a credit to help mitigate the impact. Do people really buy carbon offset credits for their personal use? I didn't think that was a thing.
I think it's a feel-good thing. I mean,
I've never heard that in my life. People going, well, I have to go to Florida next month, so I'm gonna buy my carbon credit. Are they trying to? I didn't see anything in the transportation section.
And
where
are they
trying to establish a plan like that? And it just seemed like they know something I don't. So I didn't know if I was in the dark or.
Yes.
I'm being genuine. I genuinely thought that this was something that I just didn't know about.
I have something like that for my home electricity. It, I forget the name of the company, but they are replacing, or not replacing, but for every bit of electricity that I buy, they guarantee that they will generate that much by solar and wind somewhere else. And at first I was doing that 50% of my energy use for free, but now they're dropping that and they're charging me $5 a month to do it for all of my energy use. And I guess I'll stick with that. But so it is an offset in that kind of way, but not for transportation.
I have seen in the media discussions over whether these they actually do the investment. It's kind of a go back to trust and verify as far as nuclear arms things go. Are they really doing what they say they're going to do when you, let's say you're going to fly to Europe and you buy a carbon offset? Does that really actually happen? Or are you just trusting? I'm not sure that this is an appropriate thing to be, in essence, selling. I would strike that. To me, it goes along with the biofuels as questionable.
Yeah, if it was dealing with business carbon credits, I'd be more obliged to give it the benefit of the doubt for some reason. But when they are seemingly, to me, proposing it on an individual level, it seems more like a feel-good project than an actual impact. What it should say is try to avoid long trips if at all possible. It shouldn't be saying, well, if you can't avoid it, here's a get out of jail free card, saying that you're absolved of any impact that you may have had on the environment. I think that's a poor marketing ploy. Yeah, Matt?
I just wanted to say, Linda, now I see why you couldn't find where I was talking about earlier. It's an I. They just mislabeled it with an H. I didn't understand that initially, and now I understand that it's a typo in addition to me having a criticism of it. So I get it now.
Good catch. Do we have any further critiques, amendments, etc., on the transportation section? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so we'll move on to the next section. Thank you to everyone for their input on that. Moving on to energy and the built environment. Do we have any amendments? I know Don was the main one working on this section. Did you have much to change in there?
I didn't bring up my notes, so I should have brought that up. I don't have them in front of me, but this is actually the built environment, the existing built environment. This is where, to me, and looking at what's being done in Europe, the United Kingdom, this is where you really get if you invest in improving weatherization, the energy saving, like buy a energy efficient car. Well, cars can maybe last 10, 15 years. One of my colleagues pointed out that he went to, I forgot, Cambridge or Oxford, and pointed out that his campus where he had his classes was in a 500-year-old building. So if you're going to really, this is a section that has long-term impact. And this is one of the reasons why I think it's a very important topic. Again, one of the real questions is, will the Green New Deal fly that will help implement this? Because it's going to, looking at what's proposed in the United Kingdom, large government subsidization. And I talked to, let's just say, former Ben Sturbaum. We've known the Sturbaums since our sons were 2 years old. So, yeah, there's people have upgraded buildings, but there's still a lot of buildings that have not been upgraded in the built environment. And new construction, yeah, that's going to be built to modern standards. Anyhow, that's my take on it. And I don't have the line by line. My notes.
Andrew?
Yeah.
I don't mean to be rude, but we only have this Zoom meeting till 7:30 for some reason unknown to me tonight.
Oh, only until 7:30?
What time is it?
Yeah, I'm not sure why it's not till 8 this night, but it's not. I just thought I'd mention that.
Okay. So
if we want, I can. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead, Ben.
I can just make a new Zoom link if we want after this meeting is over, and just send it out to you guys. Or we can.
How would that work with the cats recording and everything, Linda? That's my question.
I don't think it would.
Okay.
With what?
Well, I guess they could Zoom in also. I'm not sure. I guess I could just change also, but anyway, I just thought I'd mention that we might have to prioritize some things here.
Okay. All right. So let's try and get as much done with the climate action plan as we can. We might end up having to push some of the sections until next month, because we do have to go over just a few of the election items today, per the handbook. So let's, Don, do you have any actual amendments to offer for this section, or do you have just general criticisms? If you have just general criticisms and you don't have any time,
I'd have to dig them up. I'm using my wife's laptop, and I've got my the big but is that with my bifocals, I can't read. Even if I did open, I won't be able to read my notes.
Okay, so what I would recommend then is we'll just touch back on this topic next month, and you just bring those notes with you next month, and we can go over them in detail. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'll add one thing quickly. I want to add one point quickly is as far as the aspect of this is that it potentially is a major job creator.
Yeah.
This is an important element, and I'm not sure they really brought that out as much as I would have.
Yeah. One of my criticisms about this section, I'll just go over it real quick, was again, in similar to the transportation section, but even more so, I question the ability of some of the plans to actually be enacted unilaterally by the city. So multiple points and action items on this section included things like advocate for stronger state regulation. That's a great action plan, but I don't think it's an actual. I think when you base a lot of your plan around advocating for stronger policies that someone else has to implement, it takes away some of the actual oomph of the policy you're trying to enact, if that makes any sense. But that's just a general criticism I have in general of people who are organizations that say one of our goals is to get someone else to do something. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And I'm always cautious about those and labeling them as actual substantive items to move on to.
That's a good point.
We'll move on to our next section then, which is local food. I know Dave was working on this section. Dave, did you have any technical amendments for local food?
Wait, aren't you skipping some? Waste management and water?
Oh, I had local food next on my list, but maybe I am skipping. I'm sorry. Am I not going in order?
No.
Oh, wait.
On the city website, it has the next one being local food, so that's why
So
I
you have
have it in order.
Really?
Okay. The city website goes transportation, energy and built environment, local food, waste, water, and wastewater.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not what I have.
Oh, you muted yourself, Linda.
Oops.
Sorry, spastic finger. Yes, that's okay. That's just not what I have here in front of me on paper. So you go ahead with whatever you're doing.
Okay. Dave, did you have anything for local food? And don't forget to, if you're not unmuted.
No, this document, well, especially the green space section, the author would never have passed my technical writing course if he or she had taken it, because the writing is god awful. It's not quite so bad in the food section, I think, but I sent a page of editorial comments to Lauren Travis on the food section, but nothing that requires amendments.
Okay. Did anyone else have anything to offer for the local food section?
I don't have anything specific, but going back to what you said about a few of the other sections where the strategies and the proposals are just very kind of vague. So it's like, okay, that would be a good idea, but how specifically? There's one where they're saying develop policies for to implement like local foods in city managed facilities with the hospital and Indiana University. But earlier in the section, they had said that most of the food grown in, like 90% of the food in Indiana is like imported from other states. So it's kind of just like, okay, that doesn't make sense to me. How do we connect? If we're importing all of our food, how are we going to get more local food at a place like the hospital?
Yeah.
It partly depends on how you define local food too, because James Farmer, who is in the university and actually running the university's farm, has said in the past that there just aren't that many people right around Bloomington in Monroe County that are growing local food. There are a few, but the oh boy, the Amish in some counties south of here are growing much more. And if you count those as local food, you might just say Indiana food, then there is food available and you just need to get people buying it.
One of the things that I would say is if you want to increase the amount of local food offered in your town, one of the things you should do is try to create programs to increase the production of local food, which is a great action item. I don't know, I feel like a better action item instead of, get more local food at the hospital is to actually create programs that increase the base operation of local food production. But yeah, that's just more of a general comment along the lines of what Shelby had, that I think is important to focus on as well.
I had one comment on page 6.6. The action FA3A2 says revised zoning ordinance to allow urban agriculture and remove barriers to front yard and rooftop vegetable gardens and edible landscaping and foraging. And we don't have any prohibitions for that now. It's like they grabbed this off of out of somebody else's manual from a different city. It doesn't really pertain to Bloomington.
That's good.
I thought we did have barriers for front yard gardens.
Nope.
Oh, is that just an HOA thing then?
No, there are barriers to front yard fences that are high enough to keep deer out, but
yes, that's true.
Aside from that, you can always make double fences that are not so high, and those would keep deer out. So,
but the city ordinance has no prohibition about having a garden in the front yard.
no.
I always hear people complain about it. They always go, "Oh, the city won't let me have a garden up front."
No, that's just because it's either an HOA rule or they're just listening or reading about other cities. I mean, it's kind of common in other cities, but it isn't here.
Maybe it's because you can't have a garden without a fence these days.
Good point.
I bought this house that I'm in now in 2002, and I very quickly planted a big, not big, but a small, I guess you could say, prairie plant garden out in front, and I fenced it off, and nobody's ever complained about the fences. So
you're perfectly within your rights to do that, and you can grow corn in your front yard if you want to.
Mm.
There's a family up in the neighborhood north of mine that has her house surrounded entirely by, it can't be native, obviously.
It's what now?
It's bamboo.
Oh.
Big bamboo barrier between her house and all of her neighbors' houses. And it's no way it's good for the environment, but it works.
Yeah. Bamboo is no longer, it's prohibited now in the new UDO.
Yeah.
The running, not the clump kind, but the running kind is prohibited now. Lots of people had it before that, but.
Would she be grandfathered in since she's had it for years, or would she have to get rid of it if she was reported to the city? I'm not going to report her just because I don't want to.
Well, there's nothing that says that they'd be grandfathered in.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
In our previous house, one of my coworkers, which I assume Linda would know, they had corn, multiple rows of corn and other, it looked like pretty much like a farm.
Do we have any further amendments for the local food section before we move on? That's a good catch, Linda, on what appears just to be a copy and paste error.
Yeah, that's
Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on. I think this might be the last section before we move on for today, depending on how long it takes, obviously. Like I said, we have to go over some of the election stuff by the bylaws to do. So we have to do that today. But we'll move on to waste. I know we had several people working on the waste section, including Dawn, Matt, and Bailey, who's not here this evening. Do you guys have anything to add for waste amendment-wise?
Yes and no. I mean, we don't have a lot of time for it. I did want to praise their first set of initial actions in A, 1, 2, and 3. I thought they were awesome. But then beyond that, the only thing I really questioned was action D1, where they were talking about establishing a zero waste policy for city operations, which is great, but it would require outside users of city facilities to also follow the policy, modify event permit applications to require inclusion of recycling and composting at events. I think that sounds wonderful, but I don't think it works. Like through the university and athletic events and other events, I have firsthand experience seeing that requiring recycling doesn't mean anything happens. It just means there's another colored bag and it gets thrown in the trash too. People don't sort. So there's nothing the people like janitorial type people can even do. I imagine it'd be the same thing if there was a designated composting bin. It'd get filled mostly with food, but then also random plastic cups. And so I thought that item was inadequate, basically. It was dreaming.
I concur with that. The reality is globally, virtually, whatever, even if well-cleaned plastic, the cost of virgin plastic is so low compared to what the cost of recycled plastic. You have to have a market. You have to. Our county waste person and I have had several discussions about wishful recycling, and this whole section just left me flat.
Yeah, I also kind of had generic criticism about, I think they were dreaming on a couple of these things, and I think they maybe didn't place enough emphasis on just education. Because I think that if people actually understood how this works and that they're performing aspirational recycling and that they're only making things worse, and if they knew how easy it was to compost inside or outside at home, I thought they should really boost some of the stuff that educates people, because I think they'd like to do well, and then maybe kind of have to rework some of the stuff like the zero waste one that I don't think will actually work as it is.
And one of the other things, of course, is that we're kind of tied off the bat. We wanted to reduce some significantly today plastic waste, a bag ban, but our state legislature has won't let us do that. So there's a lot of issues that have to be done at it beyond the state level, at the national level. Coal mine safety and mine reclamation did not become a real thing until the federal government set a universal standard for it.
I didn't get to spend
because
any
we're-
time on this section. Did it have a, did it discuss the idea of commercial composting, large-scale composting facilities? And did it have incentives for that sort of thing, or was it even mentioned?
I can't remember off the top of my head. I would have to look.
One thing I had a comment on with this section was I'm terrible at figuring out how to direct people to find it. It's under goal WM1, increase landfill solid waste diversion by 30% by 2030. And then initial action A3, which is support edible food donation through coordination with food bank and donations from city and community partner events. Explore expansion of effort by identifying food retailer and restaurant partners for increased participation and support. I have absolutely nothing against food banks, but I don't see how increasing, unless it's to avoid having food thrown away, I don't see how food bank donation increases are part of the waste management cycle. And that just might be me being pessimistic, but usually when food is being thrown away, it's by individual company policies due to the risk of people getting expired food. Is that really a realistic goal to try to fight food waste by increasing donations through food banks? I'm just not 100% convinced of that.
There is an effort locally by restaurants and bakeries to avoid food waste by giving it to places like food banks, but it could be improved on a lot. It's a problem with connectivity and getting people to do things in a timely manner.
Are they giving food to food banks, or are they giving it more to like community kitchen, like the
Probably more directly to places like community kitchen, yeah.
Okay, maybe that's where the disconnect came from, because I can see a program where restaurants give, you know, fresh food to community kitchen, and community kitchen turns that into a meal for people. But when I hear food bank donations, I think of, like, you know, taking nearly expired peanut butter from Kroger and repurposing it towards the food bank cycle instead of throwing it away. And I know, you know, Kroger's policies and many other big box stores is just to toss it when it's almost expired. So I just didn't know if that would be a viable strategy. But that one for restaurants definitely sounds more viable.
It can be like the two-day-old stuff from bakeries that they have to throw away completely, which could still be used.
Yeah, I think just, again, it's the general criticism I have of having your action items be based entirely on being able to convince someone else to change their long-held policy.
There was there are innovative ideas out there. One is that I've read about in the United Kingdom was the community kitchen, community fridge rather, was this group that got together in the UK, and it literally got down to the household, that if you had food, let's say leftovers, and it really, literally, you had refrigerators in churches and schools and fire stations where people could donate. But again, it's feasible to do a lot of creative thinking, but getting that to fly in a document like this, I'm not sure is realistic.
Do we have any further amendments for this section before we move on? Okay, so this I think will be Let me just take a look at the agenda real fast. Yeah, this will be the last section we go over this evening. I recommend that everyone who wants to take a look at the remaining sections, which would be water and wastewater, green space, health and safety, and the climate economy, before our next meeting to generate more comments on those sections as well. Good job on everyone who read over and had amendments to offer and participated in this process. We really appreciate it. These types of seemingly minor activities can really help forge a more technically sound environmental future for the city. So it's a good way to get our voices heard in technical language. Even though it may not be the most glamorous work, it definitely, I think, has some of the most direct impact that we can have on these different plans. So I appreciate everyone's work on that. Unfortunately, due to the time constraints tonight, we're going to have to end that discussion a little bit early. But I look forward to picking that up next month and discussing everything after water and wastewater. So if there's no objection, we have 14 minutes left. We'll move on to new business. The first point of business is appointment of a nominating committee. For those who may not be aware, the Environmental Commission holds elections. We changed it this year to hold them in February. And part of the election process is we form a Slate Committee. So the Slate Committee's job is to solicit nominations and self-nominations from individuals who wish to seek office on the EC. So there's 3 different offices. There's secretary, treasurer, vice chair, and chair. The chair does what I do, helps runs meetings, helps set the agenda, represents the commission to the city council, to the planning commission, to various other bodies that we do work with, including the Board of Public Works and the MPO, the County Environmental Commission, and others. And the chair also is generally responsible for providing reports on what the EC does to the city as a whole, so to the mayor and the city council. Vice chair takes over the duties of the chair when the chair cannot perform the duties. So if I'm ever absent, the vice chair would run the meetings, or if the chair is ever absent, the vice chair would run the meetings, as well as represent the commission at events that the chair cannot attend. And the secretary treasurer is technically responsible for amendments and any funds that we manage. We generally don't manage any funds, and the minutes are generally handled by our EC fellow, who in this case is Ben. But the secretary basically serves as an additional backup and officer to handle any miscellaneous duties that aren't handled by the chair or vice chair. The Slate Committee's purpose is if, for example, if we have no one volunteer to be secretary treasurer, the Slate Committee's job is to go and try to convince a member who they deem appropriate to take on that role to volunteer for that position. So they basically work to collect nominations, and then if they don't receive nominations, they help strong arm people into nominating themselves. It's the duty of the chair to appoint this committee. It's a 3-member committee. I'm appointing Mike Litwin, Matt Cawley, and Dave Parkhurst. I'm appointing them on the basis that they are the 3 longest serving members of the Environmental Commission, serving longer than myself and any other members of the commission that currently do serve. I've emailed them previously, and they've all agreed to serve on this committee as they have done before. So what'll happen is if anyone is interested in running for an office or volunteering for an office, I will send out an email after this meeting with their emails listed. You just need to contact one or all of them and let them know, I want to volunteer to run for whatever offices you choose, chair, vice chair, or secretary treasurer. And then at our next meeting, when we hold the elections, they'll report what nominations there are. If there's, and this is moving on into the election discussion, just moving right along into the next item. Just to recap the procedure, at the next meeting, we'll have the elections. The nominating committee will list for us the nominations that are on the floor. If there's more than one nomination for an office, we'll hold a secret ballot. Linda's kitty is appearing in the frame. I love it. We'll hold a secret ballot for offices that are contested. Linda or Ben or their designee will count those ballots, let us know who wins. If there's a tie, the chair will break the tie unless the chair is the one running for the office, in which case the vice chair will break that. We'll have the opportunity for anyone who's nominated, who's contested, to give a little 5-minute or less speech. Usually way less than 5 minutes, but as long as you want to take under that limit. And it's a pretty straightforward process. In the past, we generally haven't had contested elections, but I encourage everyone and anyone to run who wants to get involved more in the EC and in helping to lead it in 2021. Does anyone have any questions about the election process or the nominating committee or how to go about that process? Okay, so congratulations to Mike, Matt, and Dave. We appreciate you volunteering to serve again in this important role. Like I said, I'll send out an email after the meeting tonight, just so anyone who's not here knows who to contact and what email to reach them at after this meeting. Moving along to our next agenda item under new business, which is the Eco Heroes discussion. Linda, did you want to talk about the Eco Heroes discussion while you're giggling to yourself?
Yes. Sorry. Yes. It looks like we will not be able to hold the Eco Hero competition and ceremony in April as we typically do. So I had proposed moving it back till August, when we will be having our 50th anniversary celebration activities anyway. So I just wanted to bring it's kind of either we push it back or we just cancel it like we did last year, is the way I see it. Thoughts?
Matt?
I really like the idea of shooting for August. You know, if we have to cancel it, we have to cancel it, but it's totally possible that the weather would be cooperative at that point, that we could do it somewhat physically distant, if that still needs to be a thing. I think we should shoot for it.
Okay, cool.
I agree. I was very sad last year when we had to cancel Eco Heroes, but this entire shenanigans, all these shenanigans started only a month or so before we actually would have held the Eco Heroes last year. And so we canceled, and I'm fine with it. I feel confident in that decision. I don't want to plan for early this year and cancel it when I think we can shoot for August. And like Matt said, there's a very good chance of being able to have an outdoors event where we'll be able to socially distance. And if not, if we hit June, July, and the vaccine isn't going as fast as we need it to, or whatever's happening is happening, we can shoot for having maybe a virtual competition or something similar. We don't have to do things where everything's animation or everything is virtual. We can have, people paint a picture and, maybe their schools can scan it in and email it to us or something like that. There are different options that we can look into at that point in time, but I think shooting for August gives us enough time to build in those contingencies just in case we're still living under this new normal at that point in time.
Sounds good to me.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
Is there any further comment on Eco Heroes or any further discussion on that?
Looks like I should bring my cats in too. Everybody else has cats.
She's hungry. It's almost dinner time.
I have a dog at my feet.
Moving on to our next discussion, so everyone can get back to their pets as soon as possible. It's the discussion about a potential another HT commentary. Possible topics that Linda and I had discussed include green space, our 50th anniversary coming up, how to continue to reduce CO2 after COVID ends, it's down right now due to people not traveling and that sort of thing, or whether or not we should do it at all and just focus on current projects and future projects. I'd love to hear people's discussion. The only one I don't want to do right now is the 50th anniversary. If we're going to do 50th anniversary celebrations and stuff in August, I think it makes sense to try and run it as close to August as we can. But any other topics I'm more than open to. I think our last couple letters have gotten press. We actually got a reply letter yesterday to our environmental justice and density letters. It was not a favorable letter to what we wrote, but it was a letter. So anything that can increase public knowledge of the EC, I think is a good thing to do. So I think we should hold off choosing a topic until our February meeting, since we're running out of time here. We only have 4 minutes left. But I want people to be thinking over the next month about potential topics that come up in their mind as they look at environmental topics in Bloomington, okay? All right.
Good idea.
All right.
I think it's a good idea too.
Seems to me we should have columns when somebody has a real interest in writing one, and when it's a hot topic for us at the time, and not just try to have one every month.
I agree. I would love to write one about green space. I may volunteer to do that if we decide next meeting that that's the direction we want to go in, just because green space is a big topic in the Planning Commission right now, only because the Environmental Commission brought it up. And I think if we want to push for continued green space in the future, that might be a direction we want to go in. But we won't make those decisions until our next meeting in February. Matt?
And if you wanted to, you could write one now and then propose it later. I mean, anyone can write one when they feel moved to. I started writing one about encouraging people to plant trees, but I'd like to have it in the fall when I think that makes the most sense. So, I mean, you can always write, and then whenever we have it either line up with current events or line up with subsequent free time, then, send it in. We'll give any, we'll all proofread it for you, and then we should go for it.
That's a great point. I will start writing it after this meeting. All right, if there's no objection, since we're under a bit of a time crunch, we'll move on to commissioner announcements. I won't go through the list. I'll just ask, do any commissioners have announcements? If you do, just raise your hand and we'll just go through. Dave.
Just wanted to point out that, oh gosh, names always escape me. Is it Janet McCabe?
Yes.
Of the Environmental Resilience Institute, which we learned about in the last 2 meetings, has now been nominated to be Deputy Director of the EPA. And so that job will become available, presumably. Get your resumes ready if you're interested in a new job.
Thank you, Dave. Anyone else have any announcements? Susanna?
Yes, I just wanted to say that my term is up, so this is my last meeting as commissioner. I really appreciate the time that we spent together, and I'll see you in August at the Eco Heroes party out in the park.
Excellent. Thank you for your work.
Yes, thank you, Susanna, for all your help, especially on writing stuff. We really appreciate having an author in the room. It was helpful. Thank you so much. Any further announcements from Don?
I'm in limbo, so I don't know if my term is expiring. I haven't heard anything.
I don't think anybody's heard anything yet, Don. I don't think any letters have gone out yet. And I don't know. I'm not privy to that information, but I don't think anybody's gotten a letter yet. In all honesty, they don't come to the last second.
Yeah, they wait until the last second. My advice is that if you're interested in serving again, that you reach out to whoever appointed you, just to let them know, hi, my term's up, I'm interested in serving again. Sometimes if they don't hear from you, they may assume that you're done. So if you were appointed by the council, I'd go to the city website and email the council email, which is council@bloomington.in.gov. Or if you were appointed by the mayor, I'd reach out to Mary Catherine Carmichael in the mayor's office. She's the one that makes appointments to boards and commissions for the mayor.
I believe I was appointed by the council. Would I contact, since Dave Rowell is I'm in his district, would that be?
You could, or you could email the council email, which is council@bloomington.in.gov. That goes to the city council attorney, Stephen Lucas, who then can send it to the city council members themselves.
Or I could CC the two of them.
Yeah. Any further announcements from commissioners as we close the meeting?
I did send around the MC Iris meeting, and I do really feel that the current work with the Invases has a lot to do with the connectivity project that maybe help get it moving.
Everyone take a look at that report. I took a look at it. It's interesting. So I would take a look at it. Any further announcements? Do we have a motion to adjourn? Right.
Second.
More motions. Excellent. So we are adjourned at 7:31. Thank you all so much. We'll catch back up in February.
Bye, everybody.
Have a great one.